We talked about how we're expecting an increase in helicopter sales. Why is that? What's driving that?
For us in the region, it really comes down to the parapublic market and the government markets that we're looking at. I don't know if we'd say a large increase, but we do see a positive outcome over the next couple of years. So I think that's where we're looking at for us is the bigger parapublic market that's in Asia Pacific.
Can you quantify that increase?
No,
and is it pretty much driven by government spending?
Yeah, it'll be done by government spending. So the challenge with quantifying it is that sometimes you'll have a big deal that'll take place in 1 year, and then it may take a couple years again for that government to purchase again. So some of the governments around here, 2020, 2021 will be some of the bigger purchases.
Where in Asia?
So specifically, we just had a tender come out of Australia for between 16 and 20 aircraft. So that will be something we'll be focused on here over the next few months, responding to that tender for Australia.
Any anecdotal evidence that the coronavirus could affect sentiment or growth in the next 12 months?
I think we're all looking at that to see what's going to happen. I think as it's still brand new to all of us here, all the team is trying to figure out what's going to happen here. Obviously in Singapore, China, right now we're following, we have offices there that have had to close. So there will be, I think there's going to be some type of impact, but it'll really depend on how these countries react to the virus, I think.
How are you looking to mitigate the effect of this coronavirus should it hit the company?
We already have the plans in place as far as making sure we can continue with our business. Singapore government's done a great job with providing us the framework to put those plans together. So we already are prepared if we end up going to red, who's going to be in the office, who's not going to be in the office, and then what are our critical tasks that have to be done. So working with the government here in Singapore, with our teams and our HR departments, we're already planning to the future to make sure we continue our business.
The oil and gas industry is also posing some sort of a drag on your business. How is that looking, and is there clarity in the next couple of months?
Yeah, so I think the oil and gas industry, when we talk to our partners, is that it's probably going to remain fairly flat as it is right now. It has been. And so but that's not really a huge market for us in Asia Pacific. On our larger aircraft that's coming out, that will be a place we are looking. But I come back to the Asia Pacific's really a lot more government sales for us here, and that's really our focus.
Is the stronger dollar impacting sales in the region, because a lot of business is done, through
it is, I think,
USD.
The nice thing is we do have a lot of suppliers that are based internationally. So our stronger dollar actually can help us when we purchase parts for some of our aircraft. So hopefully we have a balance there. We haven't seen a big challenge with that here in Asia Pacific yet, but it is always a challenge when we're selling outside of the U.S. into the international markets.
There's a lot of talk about urban mobility as we look towards the new economy, the fourth industrial revolution. How are you positioning yourself for that? So,
right off the bat, the first thing we did was we changed our name. So we're not even a helicopter company anymore. We're Bell. We're an innovation company. And if you watch what our CEO, Mitch Snyder, is doing, a lot of focus in on air mobility. We came out with a Nexus a couple years ago at CES. We just came out with a new Nexus, which is a full electric Nexus. But we're also looking at the backbone and the framework of that market, because building the platform is one thing, and we'll all compete just like we do. As you can see back here, we all compete on the platforms, but the infrastructure itself, how these smart cities are going to go down that path, we're starting to put a fair amount of work and innovation into that. How are you going to get on your helicopter, your air taxi, and fly it from point A to point B, making sure that's safe, making sure that the regulations are in place. So that's going to be another big focus for Bell.
It is an increasingly competitive space.
Yes.
You talk about Nexus. What's the advantages, the disadvantages compared to your rivals?
So I think for us is making sure that we've been doing what we call vertical flight. And if you look at our aircraft, we take off vertically, but we transition to a horizontal flight. And that allows us to go further and faster. And that's, if you come out here and look, the V-22 is a perfect example of an aircraft that is performing wonderfully for the Marine Corps. And its ability to take off vertically and then fly horizontally quick and such and efficiently. So we think that's going to be our advantage, is our ability to have been doing this for 50 years.
There's also a lot of talk about air taxis. Realistically, will there be demand? Where will demand come from? And how soon do you think this will become a reality?
So there's already demand for air taxis today. So if you run down into Jakarta, we've got a company down there called PT White Sky that can pick you up at the airport and bring you anywhere in the city in about 10 or 15 minutes. I've used the service. I know other people who have too. And if you've ever spent any time there, it typically will take you just as long to fly from Singapore to Jakarta as it will to take a taxi from the Jakarta airport to a hotel. So by having this air taxi service, which is done in a Bell 505 today, I can can cut that time down to 15 minutes instead of an hour or sometimes 2 hours. So if you look at the Philippines, we're also doing air taxis around there. Obviously, all the big cities, New York City, places like that, are already using helicopters as air taxis. So the beauty of the new air taxis will be the ability to reach more masses of people who actually can have the funding or the budget to actually use them.
So how do you get there, David? I mean, how do you scale it and make it more accessible to people like me?
So I think it comes to the infrastructure, and it's going to also come to the design of the platform. So one of the big costs in a helicopter today is a turbine engine. So you're spending a lot of money just paying for the gas that goes in the aircraft. So when we can get to a hybrid or an electric vehicle, we can now reduce the cost of the operations. So instead of being $1,000 an hour, we can get it down to a much lower number. And then when we work together, as we would with car sharing, that gives you opportunities to get the price to a level where you and I can afford to go do that.
When you take a look at the industry, what do you view as the biggest challenge in the next 12 to 24 months?
So if we look at, holistically right now, I mean, obviously the coronavirus is going to be a challenge for us. Regulations within, for me, Asia Pacific. Right now in the U.S. and we have FAA, in Europe we have EASA. Our biggest challenge here is that every country in Asia Pacific has its own regulatory, and we're working hard as we can to try to get them to be one across the board. It makes it a lot easier for when we go in and fly, when we work on aircraft, we do maintenance, repair, and overhaul. Having one regulatory over all of Asia Pacific would be a great start for us to work on.